If you've been watching TFL Classics, you probably know that we recently purchased this, a 1995 Nissan Pathfinder. But did we make the right decision? Did we pick a good one? And how does this Pathfinder 4x4 kind of fit into the history of Nissan trucks and SUVs? And I have the expert to help me figure this out, because right here is Jay. Jay, thanks for coming.
Absolutely.
Jay is the owner and operator of XterraNation.org, the last surviving enthusiast-owned Xterra message board. He also helps organize Gone Moab, the annual Nissan off-road event, for the last 20 years.
So Jay, can you please introduce yourself kind of quickly, and how did you get into Nissans?
Well, my name's Jay Anderfuren. I've been around Nissans pretty much my whole life. I learned how to drive stick in a 95 Altima.
Okay.
So it's just kind of one of those things I've always had growing up. And then when I got older and wanted to start wheeling, the Nissan is where I went. I did have a Jeep for a short time, but I regretted that decision and and went back to this.
Okay, so in this video, I want to do a couple things, right? I want to take a look at our 95 Pathfinder.
Yep.
Just kind of get your opinion and kind of things to good and the bad, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then also take a look at your Xterra and figure this out. So, where do you want to start on the Pathfinder?
Well, I think overall, just visually, this is a really clean truck.
Okay.
It is hard to find 95s, mid-90s first-gen Pathfinders that are this clean. I mean, you've got a little bit of, clear coat wear, some paint coming off on some of the trim, not a big deal. Underneath, these things are rock solid. They're overbuilt for what the truck is actually capable of. The only thing that in any way lets this truck down is the little bit of rust on the back corner.
Yeah. Should we look underneath? I mean, were they known for some sort of rust issues underneath, like the frame and stuff?
Not usually. Okay. Not usually. They're usually really solid underneath. Of course, salt ruins everything. Yeah. But typically, not a whole lot of issues underneath on these trucks. The front suspension is a torsion bar setup. So those do wear out just like any other spring. So on the older trucks, you might see the front end sitting a little bit lower. But the nice thing is you can crawl under there and adjust the torsion bars and kind of pick it back up where it was.
Yeah, and what we liked about this one is it looks kind of stock. I mean, Absolutely. It wasn't messed with. And let's take a look at the interior. And the interior was amazing.
No, this is probably one of the cleanest interiors on a first-gen Pathfinder I've ever seen. It's really clean.
So let's go over a couple of issues before we look under the hood. So there's one issue that, so it has power locks, by the way. So it's kind of it's got a few options for the day, right?
Yeah.
But when you lock it, this key doesn't work anymore.
Right. So at some point, somebody blew that key cylinder out, and it just needs to be replaced. I mean, that's a 20-minute locksmith job. Okay, there you go. And of course, I mean, this is one of the keys right here, and it may have been replaced already. Oh yeah, that's an aftermarket key. This is classic Nissan shape. This is what they had in all the Z's in this time period. Mm-hmm. Nissan hasn't changed their keyway in probably 40 years. So my key for my Xterra will fit in that ignition. It won't do anything, but it'll go in there. But this body, this is an aftermarket body. It's the kind you get from Home Depot or something. Yeah. But it's in the shape of what the Z keys used to be.
Yeah, and this is four-wheel drive SE.
Yep.
Did I get that right?
Yep.
And look, automatic front hubs.
Yeah, and those front hubs have been on Nissan trucks, starting with the first-gen Pathfinder, all the way up through the first-gen Xterra that ended in 2004, and they're really good. They're really good. There's a cut, you see guys out there like, oh, I got to have manual hubs. Yeah. I wouldn't even mess with it.
So there's one major problem with this truck, SUV, is the odometer stopped. And you were asking me this before, the speedometer is working.
Right.
On the way here, the speedometer is correct.
Right.
What do you think is happening?
That's probably just an electrical fault in the cluster. Because if the speedo is working, the odometer should be rolling. Okay. Because they're related. Okay. And it's probably just a fault in the cluster. Upside is, because it's a mechanical cluster, you can go get a cluster off of eBay, roll the mileage to match what it should be, and just put it in.
Yeah, so we're not sure. I'm not sure exactly about the history of this thing. I mean, we can look it up and try to do the VIN number check and all that stuff. But well, let's look under the hood and figure out, like, you know, what were some of the power options and
Absolutely.
if we got a good one.
All right.
By the way, this is an automatic.
Yes.
Was that popular? Do you know?
There was a manual available. It was a 5-speed manual. Again, same one that was in the Z at the time. Certainly, the automatic was definitely more popular.
Even back then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I think probably on a percentage wise, it's probably about 60-40 automatic to manual. You know, this was while there were still a lot of stuff that was manual. I mean, these cars, if you got the base model, manual windows, manual locks.
Yeah.
You know,
this got a few luxury features.
Absolutely.
On it.
Yeah.
So tell me about this motor.
So this is the Nissan VG30. It's a 3-liter V6. It about 145, 150-ish horsepower.
When it was brand new.
When it was brand new. Probably not anymore.
So what do you think? I mean, just looking at it,
it's clean.
Yeah,
it's really clean. Like it's almost too clean. That's because,
no, I know what you're saying. Right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at some of the interior in the back too.
Sure.
Oh, also the design.
Yeah, so the design cues on this are something that Nissan has done with SUVs ever since the Pathfinder was first introduced in the early or mid 80s. Is they didn't want it to look like a 4-door. They wanted it to look like a pickup truck with a cab on it, and so they buried the rear door handles in the pillar. Made all this, you know, this is all factory, this black trim.
Yeah.
And so if you're just glancing at it, it just looks like a pickup truck.
Yeah, right.
And they kept that vertical door handle design on every one of their SUVs since.
That's very interesting. Your Xterra has one.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, but they did make a 2-door.
They did. For 3 years in the 80s, they made a 2-door version of this. That if you can get your hands on one, that's a good thing. There's not that many of them left, but it's a really cool truck.
Do you know if they had like sunroof options on these too?
Not on these, not on the first gens. You didn't start to see sunroofs until the second gens.
Okay.
When the truck went unibody.
And this was interesting too. There's a sensor right here that can tell the driver if this spare tire carrier was closed or not.
Right. Yeah, just like a door sensor, and there's a light on the cluster that says, "Hey, you didn't put your spare away."
Which is, you know, could be important if you're driving and this starts to swing.
Absolutely.
So back here, it's also pretty clean, except these struts are not holding.
Yeah. So and really this one these are original. You know, they still got the Nissan logo on them. So from 1995, it's I'm not surprised.
So what did we pay? I think we paid about $4,000 for this one. Does that sound like a good price?
If the mileage is real, yeah.
Okay.
that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
Typically, when you see these with 100, 200,000 miles, it's a $1,500 truck.
Yeah.
You know, and because the interior is ratted out, and it wasn't taken care of. But for as clean as this thing is, if it's a 70,000 mile truck, that's not bad.
Jay, would you mind to kind of start the truck and also kind of go over some of the features, because it has a few switches and options here.
Sure. So, starts right up.
Yes.
Again, these engines are really reliable. So on the center console, you've got a fog light switch. This does have the factory fog lights on the grille. You have a release, which I believe is for the back glass, to pop that. And this is the factory 90s Nissan security system. Don't ever use this switch. If you get one of these trucks, don't ever turn that switch on.
What is it? Is this like an ejection seat, or what is that?
This has a immobilizer in it.
Yeah.
If the alarm goes off, and I guarantee you, if you throw that switch, you'll set it off and the truck won't start.
Because it will be hard to fix.
Yeah, they're notoriously unreliable for the security system. Automatic transmission, manual transfer case engagement, all your climate control. This is as basic as it gets, but you know what? It all works. That's the cool thing. Dash dimmer, rear defroster, Obviously some option that was never installed.
Huh. Yeah.
But other than that, for a mid-90s Nissan, this thing is pretty loaded.
Look at this book.
This is really cool to see the original manuals for this thing, and it looks like they've never actually been out of the packaging. You know, all the spines. I mean, there's no creases here at all. So that's actually really cool to have the original books for this.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And they didn't have leather back then, right?
No, there was no leather option.
This was kind of as luxurious as it got.
Yep, that was, and they carried that into the first gen Xterra, of course, with the tagline, everything you need, nothing you don't.
So Jay, this is your rig, obviously a modified Xterra. What year is this?
This is a 2007.
Okay. And proper manual, right?
Proper manual 6-speed.
Okay. So why did you choose the Xterra, I guess?
Well, when I started getting into wheeling and everything, and I bought a first gen Pathfinder, or excuse me, a first gen Xterra, and loved that truck. Did everything with it, modified it, was lifted on 33s, put an ARB rear locker in it. It was a fantastic truck. And then it got to the point where I kind of reached that platform's capability and I wanted something else. So I sold that and bought this, completely stock when I bought it. 120,000 miles on it, out of Connecticut. So I've had it for about 5 years. Obviously not stock anymore.
Right. Yeah, you kind of improved a lot of the elements of it.
Yeah, so with
off-roading.
With the rock sliders, the whole underside is 3/16 steel. It's all skid plated under there. 35s on Titan wheels. The next iteration that I have all the parts for that I'm in the process of doing is actually putting the Titan axles and suspension in this.
Okay.
So what that does is it increases the track width 3 inches per side. Longer control arms means more travel.
Yeah.
And bigger brakes and
maybe a larger tire.
I'm going to stick with the 35s.
35s is probably big enough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple of guys that I've seen that have put 37s on them, and you have to really cut into the fender in the front for clearance, and not something I want to get into.
Right. But you do have bumper up front. You know,
right. So yeah, steel bumpers front and rear.
Yeah.
With the tire carrier, because obviously the factory spare fits underneath the truck, and when you go this big, it doesn't work anymore.
I gotcha.
So as it sits now, it's got 160,000 miles on it. This has the VQ40 4-liter V6.
Yeah. Let's show it.
Yeah, let's get it open.
And now the 4-liter, I mean, that's been in every Frontier for the last 16 years, and and these.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great engine. There were some issues with these, with this engine and the VQ35 and 37 in the 2004 to 2009 range, where they made the timing chain shoes out of an inferior material, and they wore down every 20,000 miles.
Ouch.
And you had to rip the engine apart and replace them.
Okay.
They redesigned the shoes for 2010. It's got a timing chain. It's bulletproof. It doesn't have to do anything.
So people just have to watch out for those several years. Then,
right. And also with these and the Frontiers and the Pathfinders, the 05 to, again, 2009, 2010, if you have an automatic, there was also an issue called S-Mod, which is the strawberry milkshake of death.
Ooh, okay.
What happens is the coolant, or excuse me, the transmission fluid that Nissan used in those years, because the radiator has a transmission cooler in it.
Okay.
So the transmission fluid was corrosive and it ate the wall between the radiator and the transmission cooler.
Because it was in one assembly, I guess. Yeah.
And so what would happen is you'd end up mixing the fluids, you end up with coolant in your transmission.
Hence the strawberry milkshake.
Right.
Okay, gotcha.
And at that point, you need a new transmission.
Ouch.
Now, another reason to get a manual one of these, not a concern. Because it's a manual. It doesn't, it's got gear fluid in it. There's no cooler. It's just solid. But so that was an issue from, again, 05 to 09. You'll see a lot of these second gen Xterras and Pathfinders for sale dirt cheap because they need a transmission.
I see.
If you get one that's good and the transmission's still good, it's a really good idea to immediately replace the radiator, flush all the fluids.
Can you show me? You have a cool module on top of your dash too.
Yeah, so this is on top of the dash there, that is an inclinometer and altimeter out of a two-door mid-80s Toronto, which was the JDM Pathfinder. That's what they called it.
Okay.
I had that one imported from Australia and bolted it to the top, and it's really nice to have a functional inclinometer off-road.
Yeah, totally.
And it's even cooler that it's an OE Nissan part.
Yes.
Of course, proper manual.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So this was been, would you say a good buy, this one particular?
Yeah. I when I bought it about 5 years ago, I paid about $8,000 for it, completely stock. So, I mean, today, the way that the used car market is, insane.
Yeah.
The price that's actually a pretty good price even today, $8-9 for one of these.
Yeah, it seems like used, especially off-roader, four-wheel drive SUVs and or trucks, the prices surprise me every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty amazing what you can do. So I guess, I mean, that's not indicative of this particular generation, right? Because all the prices seem to go up.
Yeah. And this one is also the off-road trim, which has a factory rear locker in it.
Yeah.
So that was another thing to be aware of, is on these, again, that early 05 to about 09, they used a 2-pin locker in the back, which was not really strong enough once you get, this big. And so 2010, they put a 4-pin locker in it.
Okay.
And it's a much better rear end.
I gotcha.
And that was only available on the off-road and Pro 4X trims.
And I can see disc brakes front and back.
Yep.
But of course, the first gen Pathfinder has drums in the back.
Some of them. If you go to 90, 97, 98, there was a smattering of rear disc Pathfinders.
Okay.
They're pretty rare, but they do exist.
So Jay, I want to close on kind of two questions. First, looking at the used market, what would you recommend? Like, what's a great buy as far as a used four-wheel drive SUV from Nissan?
Well, I mean, if you can get into one of these and, actually want to daily drive it, you got a lot more power, a lot more space, a lot more modern vehicle. To get into one of these that's in good shape, you're probably in the $7,000 to $8,000 to $9,000 range. To go with a Pathfinder or very similarly first gen Xterra, you're going to be in the $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 range for a good one. The problem is that most of these that are out there have 200,000 miles on them,
or rust or something else,
right? Or they're falling apart. And
I made a mistake though. We paid $3,700 for this one.
That's a pretty good deal.
I thought it was $4,000, but I mean, still, it was in that neighborhood.
Yeah. Again, if the 70,000 miles is reality, that's a really good deal.
Cool. And the second question is, I want to talk really briefly about the unicorns, the supercharged ones, because one of my favorite trucks was the supercharged V6 Frontier.
There was a lot more of the supercharged Frontiers than there were on the Xterras.
Yeah.
But that engine, again, same basic engine that you have in the Pathfinder, little bit longer stroke, so it's a 3.3 liter, and then they put a Roots style supercharger on top of it.
Yeah.
And they did that. They did that from 02 to 04.
Okay.
So it was in terms of the Frontier and the Xterra, there was the first gen, which was like 99 to 2001, and then the 02 to 04 they did a complete facelift and redesigned the interior. So it's called a 1.5. At that, it's still the same truck. It's just style overhaul.
Yeah. The
supercharger was only available on the 1.5 gen.
Yeah.
And if you wanted it with a supercharger and a manual, it was 2002. That was it.
That's it. Those are those must be valuable, right?
Yeah, typically if you get a good condition, and it's funny you use that because that's the same word I use for it. It's a unicorn. If you can get your hands on a clean one of those, you're talking close to 10 grand.
Or I guess name your price at that point.
Yeah, because there's just not that many around.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, thank you I learned a lot today. Thank you for coming. And where is xterranation.org a good place to learn?
So yeah, that is my website.
Okay.
I run it. It is the last non-corporate owned Nissan enthusiast
kind of
forum.
Independent.
Yeah. So it's all the other Nissan forums have all been handed off to these giant corporations and everything. But Xterra Nation has no ads. a whole bunch of users. We're a really active community. So anything on these Nissan trucks, it's a great place to come and just learn.
So hopefully you enjoyed this expert buyer's guide and learned about some of the used off-road SUVs. And as always, go back to tfloffroad.com, also tfltruck.com if you want more truck stuff. Thanks.